This is the Buried in Work podcast, where we share tips and interview experts to help you simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks.
I'm your host today, Adam Zuckerman, and today we have a very special guest, Chad Hufford. Chad's the founder of Veritas Wealth Management. It's a firm that's managing $500 million of assets, and they serve hundreds of families across Alaska and beyond. He's a best-selling author, financial expert with over 17 years of financial planning in the industry. Today, Chad's going to share insights on financial planning, investment mindset, and creating high-performance habits. Chad, it is phenomenal to have you here today. Thank you.
Adam, the pleasure is mine, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Now, let's start off really basic. Talk about your journey into financial planning. What inspired you to start Veritas Wealth Management?
Well, you shared a little with me offline about your father, the impact that he had and what you're doing. And I can't say that my father didn't have a similar impact. I grew up in the financial industry. And as you know, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was extremely product focused. And I saw, though, the difference that somebody can make if you actually take an individual and you teach them how to use the tools they already have better, rather than just trying to give them a new tool. You know, it'd be like somebody that can't drive a car, you just give them a faster car and expect them to be a better driver. And like, I've got a daughter learning to drive right now. It's pretty scary, but she's, bumping into things here and there, but I'm not going to give her a Ferrari and expect anything to get better. In fact, she's going to get into trouble faster. So I saw the need to actually teach people how to have a better relationship with their finances. And as you already mentioned in the intro, a better mindset, a better perspective on how finances fit into their life. And what I realized, Adam, is that when you change people's clarity and confidence around finances, you don't just change their money life, their financial life. You have a ripple effect into every facet of what they do. So I saw my dad have that impact. He taught classes at our church and our community. I saw how he changed people's lives using money and finances as a tool. But I didn't really plan to go into it myself. I have a degree in biochemistry. Both of us have interesting pathways to where we are here today. I thought I was going to help people build a better life through medicine, for putting people back together physically. And about 20 years ago, I met the woman who's now my wife, mother of my 6 kids, and I realized that she was much more interested in having a family, having a husband, raising kids together, than having a hotshot surgeon. And here we are today. I realized I could have a huge impact in people's lives, make good money, have a tremendous amount of autonomy, own a practice rather than having a job that owned me. And it's been a blessing. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been an amazing ride.
So we talk about the family that you have. Financial literacy is important, that you not only understand your assets, your portfolio for yourself. When do you start teaching your kids about financial literacy as it leads up? Because a lot of people think that financial planning, estate planning, it only comes together at the end of someone's life. Should we be starting a lot earlier?
I was probably 5 or 6 years old when my dad sat me down and explained what a stock was. And he told me about how I owned parts of McDonald's and these different places. McDonald's was the one I remembered because my recollection of this is I can walk in there, get as many fish fillets and Happy Meals as I want, start ordering people around. My dad saw the wheels spinning. He's like, let me just slow you down a little bit. You don't own any particular McDonald's. You have an ownership share. But he was explaining the difference between stocks and bonds. And here's what was super cool about the way I grew up, Adam. And I didn't know there was anything weird about this until I was an adult. But we just talked about money, and most families don't. And the problem with what you just said, part of the problem is that a lot of people, when they're growing up, money is only discussed when it's stressful. It's discussed only when it's the bad guy, when there's not enough of it, or somebody squandered it, or somebody's lost their job. And it's often brought up under only adverse circumstances. So it's no wonder that by the time people are adults, they kick the can down the road. They try to avoid these conversations until they absolutely have to have them. And we take something important and we wait till there's an emergency. And that's where a lot of people actually reach out to us. It's after somebody dies and they're inheriting money, or they just got a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis. They realize they're not going to be able to work as long as they wanted to, or somebody else retired and that person being gone from their job now makes their own job miserable. So like, I don't want to be here forever, but there's usually oftentimes somewhat of a traumatic trigger. But what we want to do is get people, as you're doing, ahead of that. And so, long-winded way of answering your question, I don't think there's any time that's too early to start talking about money. And you don't have to be an expert, but I think just opening the conversation. So if you've got kids at the house, just having regular discussions about it. Kids don't need to know the details. Talk about, what the impact of leaving lights on and on the electric bill. And if we had taken that money and saved it instead, and just having open discussions. And I was talking about with my son last night. He got home from commercial fishing for a month, and he's had more money than he's ever had in his life. And he was asking about Bitcoin, and I was very disappointed. But no, we talked about, well, what are your goals? Like, let's attach, money is just a tool. Let's attach an objective to it. And one of the coolest dad moments I've had around this is maybe 2 years ago. It's 2 years ago, and my two youngest, who were 2 and 4 at the time, they walk up to me, and the oldest, the spokesperson, said, "Dad, we've been talking." I thought, "Oh, great, here we go." And he's like, "We need money." That you're 2 and 4. Like, what do you need money for? But I let him keep going. So he goes, "Dad, we've been talking. We need money. What kind of jobs do you have for us to do?" And I thought, wow, at 2 and 4, they've already connected. I want to buy something. That means I need money. That means I better get to work and start earning some of that. So I don't think that there's any time that's too early to start opening up these conversations and getting people more acquainted with money and finances and the impact those things can have on somebody's life.
And I think that's an interesting perspective and probably testament to how you're raising your kids, and that they recognize that work is associated with money, not the magic ATM in the wall that you just walk up to and money comes out of. And one of the reasons that we wanted to have you as a guest on the show is because of that parallel that you just mentioned, where a lot of people focus on their finances during a stressful period and they don't talk about it before that. And that's a direct parallel with how so many people approach estate planning. You need to start early. The last thing you want to do is start when there's a challenging situation. Someone's sick or in an accident or about to pass away. That's not the time to be learning. If we have listeners that are interested in getting started, if they have time, or if they want to share this with their younger self or someone that is close to them, a family member, a child, a friend, how can they start developing that healthier investment mindset?
Well, I think one of the hard things with this, Adam, is when we are planning for the future, whether it's end of life planning, whether it's retirement planning, we're doing it for either our family or a future version of ourselves or a future version of our family. All those are abstract concepts. Like, I am providing something for a future version of my kid, my wife, whatever, or just a future version of me. Getting a connection between what we're doing today and what that objective is in the future is really important. And too many people don't have a clear objective. Just going back to investing, a lot of people aren't really investing as much as they are collecting investments. There's no blueprint, there's no plan, and it'd be no different than somebody trying to build a house and they're just mindlessly going up and down the aisles of Home Depot, picking tools and materials off the shelves, getting out in the parking lot and saying, "Okay, I'm 62. I should probably figure out how to get all these parts and pieces together." And that's not the time to be doing it. The time to be doing it is starting with a blueprint with meaningful objectives in mind, and then reverse engineering that blueprint. Here's where I want to be in 10, 15, 20 years. I'm going to reverse engineer that to where I am today so I can connect my current actions, decisions, and behaviors to the person I want to be and where I want to be decades down the road.
Let's try and take that recommendation into some tangible actions or learnings that people can walk away from. So what are the steps that people should take? Give them actual tips that if they stop listening after this question, they can start getting themselves organized or getting to work.
How much money would I need to live comfortably and never need a paycheck ever again? That is one of the most critical questions that people need to answer. So if you stop getting a paycheck today, how much money would you need to bring in every single month to live comfortably and feel like you never needed a paycheck ever again? And you notice I didn't even call it retirement yet, because for some people, retirement isn't necessarily what their objective should be, but getting them to a place of a work optional lifestyle, a job optional lifestyle where they're independent from a paycheck. But how much money will you need showing up in your checking account in order for that life to take place, in order for you to be in a position where you can live independently from a paycheck. So I think coming up with an income target, now the target can move, it can change, that's okay. But a great place to start is coming up with that strategic objective, because it gives you something to shoot for. Because here's the thing with financial planning, as you know, there's no referee at the end zone telling that you've scored. Like, okay, touchdown, you've done it, you're here. And for a lot of people, the goalposts keep moving. There's always more. You can always work another year. You can always put more money in. There's nobody saying that's enough. So I think it's important to have measurable, finite goals for our investing and for our financial planning.
All right. So we've got that target. We're moving forward properly. What are some of the costly mistakes that you see investors make, and how can they avoid them?
One of the things that people do, well, you've already alluded to it. We've taken something important that doesn't seem urgent. We keep kicking the can down the road until there's a triggering event. So I think our finances are a lot like our health.
Mm-hmm.
If we ignore them, they only deteriorate. So we don't want to be in a financial situation where we've had a financial heart attack and now we're worried about our health, right? And a lot of people with their physical health wait until they get to a point where they've had an emergency. They've had a huge health scare. Like, okay, now I need to watch my diet and exercise. People shouldn't wait until they have that event to start taking care of their physical health. They shouldn't wait until they've had a financial heart attack to take care of their financial health. So that's a big one. Another one is misinterpreting what produces financial independence. A lot of people, when they open their statement, they look at their investments, what they're looking at, Adam, is their principal. Financial independence comes from income, not from principal. And the problem with that is, as people get closer to retirement, they start trying to stabilize their principal. That's just units of currency. And as we know, currency over time loses value. So a lot of people, in trying to stabilize principal, end up stabilizing income, and bringing a fixed income into a rising cost retirement is a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is learn how to weather those storms of volatility, learn how to look past temporary price declines to build a rising income in retirement. Because again, you can't bring a stable income into a rising cost world and figure you're going to get through retirement okay.
That's a really interesting mindset shift that we've spoken to other experts and they've harped on that a little bit in a similar way. On the one hand, most people, when you're growing up, you go, I want to be a millionaire when I'm a kid. I want to be a millionaire when I get older. But you never hear a child go, or at least I haven't heard a child go, you know what? I want to have $10,000 of annual recurring income every single month, which would be great. And to shift that mindset. How do people start making that change? And what does that really do for them if they can actually shift from a asset bank to look at a number on a balance sheet versus annual recurring income?
Well, number one, a lump sum of money is not very tangible, especially for somebody who's younger. I want to be a millionaire. Well, you know what? If you're listening to this and you're 35 years old, by the time you're 60, $1 million isn't going to do much for you at all. I mean, it's still going to be a decent sum of money, but it certainly isn't going to build financial independence by itself. $1 million, even right now, somebody who's a millionaire is probably barely financially independent with a very, very modest lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So again, that's not something, a concept we can wrap our heads around. How much money am I spending every month right now compared to where I want to be? That's much more tangible. So here's where it comes down to, Adam, is taking financial goals and weaving them into lifestyle goals. That's what we're trying to do, because it brings emotions into it. It makes it more meaningful, and we can start attaching what is actually meaningful in our life to how we're going to plan financially. Because money and wealth itself should not be the goal. It's a means to an end. Money is a tool that allows you to build a life of freedom, independence, and autonomy. That's what I believe. I can't tell you what freedom, independence, and autonomy means to you, but what we can do is talk about lifestyle goals, attach some numbers to them, which are going to be income goals, because you're not going to take your 401k statement on a cruise with you. You're not going to take your 401k statement to Costco to buy groceries. You're not going to take your 401k statement to pay for the fishing trip. You use income to do those things. And it's much more tangible thinking about day-to-day lifestyle. What do I want my life to look like? That first day of retirement, what's happening? What is going to make that life different than the way I'm living right now? And it allows us to get much more connected with those goals rather than having arbitrary numbers on a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet that doesn't really trigger us emotionally. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's a great way to characterize things. When you have people sit down with you and you ask them, what are your lifestyle goals? I think that's an unbelievably important thing for people to lay out. Do you oftentimes find that someone's aspiring goal just, quite frankly, doesn't harmonize with their current income of what they're making now, of, hey, you've got to make some changes, or you're just not going to be able to have that yacht in the Riviera or take that 9-month trip around the world?
I think it's more behavior that doesn't align with future goals. I mean, sometimes income is a part of it, but I mean, a lot of the folks that we sit down with have enough income to meet their future goals, but they don't necessarily have the right behaviors and habits to align with those future goals. So, it'd be like somebody coming in and you mentioned, camping and hiking and things like that, saying, okay, I want to climb 10 of Colorado's 14ers next year, but I eat most of my meals at Burger King and McDonald's, and I exercise 7 minutes a week, and that's only walking from my car into Burger King or McDonald's. Okay, you might not have the greatest genetics, you might not have the greatest pedigree, but everything that person has is probably enough to meet some of those goals, but they've got to get their habits realigned. And a lot of times people their choices, their behaviors are not aligned with the person that they say they want to become and where they want to be financially in the future. They're taking on too much debt. They're spending too much money. They're worried too much about temporary volatility rather than long-term income. I mean, all those things are actually behavioral choices that somebody has to make. We have people that are truck drivers that never made $60,000, $70,000 a year that are now financially independent. Some of them are multimillionaires. We work with a lot of blue collar millionaires, people that made decent money but not great money, that have tremendous lifestyles now because they had the discipline, patience, and perseverance to push through even without having a huge income.
The story of the blue collar millionaire, I think, is absolutely wonderful. Sometimes people associate, if you want to make $1 million, if you want to be, 7 figures in assets, recurring income, you have to have a nice white collar job. Let's talk about some of the blue collar jobs and show that it is possible.
80% of the folks that I work with personally come out of blue collar work. So that 80% of the people I work with are blue collar millionaires. They are pipe fitters, welders, electricians, plumbers. A lot of them work in the oil field. We've got a lot of cops and firefighters. That covers most of them right there. We've got a few Department of Transportation workers that are out in the Denali Highway, middle of nowhere, fixing potholes while they're watching bears and caribou cross the street. But these aren't people that have incredible incomes. Now, some of our oil field folks have decent, relatively high incomes. But again, they're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day up in the North Slope. But what they do have is tremendous discipline, and they have focus. And it goes back to mindset. And mindset and behavior is what really separates investors more so than knowledge, education, and intelligence. And there's a lot of people that I meet that have huge incomes that still live basically paycheck to paycheck. And then we meet people that make $80,000 a year and still figure out how to save 15% of their income and are multimillionaires. So it really does come down to not how much money you bring in, but how you leverage and how strategic you are with what you send that money out to do once you get it.
So it's important to make your money work for you as opposed for you working for the money.
Well, and you have to tell your money where to go instead of spend every month wondering where it went. And that's where a lot of people are. And a lot of times the more money you make, it seems like the less accountability your money needs to have. Well, I'll just make more. You cannot out-earn bad financial decisions. And we see professional athletes that. I read something the other day. Allen Iverson was filing for bankruptcy. I think they said he had earned almost $200 million over the course of his career. And not to pick on Allen, I love watching him play, but I mean, we see that. So if somebody can make almost $250 million and run out of money, it just goes back to what I was saying about my daughter. Like, more horsepower doesn't fix bad driving. More money does not fix bad money management. If you can't manage $70,000, $80,000, then if you're making $500,000 a year isn't going to fix your money problems.
Mhm.
It's just going to give you a bigger shovel to dig a deeper hole.
Oh, I love that. Bigger shovel, deeper hole. Okay. Now, most people don't properly define money is a term that I've heard, or a phrase. How does that apply?
Okay. It kind of goes back to this idea about income, focusing on income
Yep.
as an investment goal and creating a rising income. Because when people think of money, they usually think of currency. They think of dollar bills, pieces of paper with dead presidents and or Benjamin Franklin. But that isn't money. That is currency. And if we're trying to accumulate currency, I mean, let me just give you a real quick.
Yeah.
If I give you $10,000 and you put it in a safe for 20 years, come down and visit, you pull it out, you have $10,000, you've preserved all your units of currency. You've lost probably half of your purchasing power due to inflation. So you would say, Chad, I have all the $10,000 you gave me. I have all the money that you gave me 20 years ago. Isn't that great? And I would tell you, Adam, man, I'm so sorry you did this because you've lost half of your purchasing power. So I think we should look at money and purchasing power. The value of goods and services and experiences that you can exchange for your units of currency. Purchasing power is how we need to be thinking of money, not units of currency. And from an investment, financial planning, life planning standpoint, then it shifts how we look at things. We're no longer looking at trying to preserve temporary units of currency. We're looking at how to preserve purchasing power over a lifetime.
Right. All right, Chad, this has been phenomenal. What do you hope our listeners take away from your insights, if there's one key thing?
I guess the biggest thing, Adam, is ownership and agency. Like it doesn't matter what your financial pedigree is, what your parents taught you, how much money you make, what mistakes you've made. I think everybody has the opportunity to make a huge impact in the trajectory of their own life. But a lot of people are sitting in the passenger's seat, waiting for an opportunity, waiting for something to happen. People need to move over, get in the driver's seat, start taking ownership, start taking accountability, maybe for the mistakes they made, the financial holes, but start acting on a plan. Otherwise, you're going to be left reacting to this crazy world around you. And please do not wait for an emergency to start that planning.
Can't agree with you more there. If people want to find you, Chad, if they want to find Veritas Wealth Management, where do they go?
VeritasAlaska.com is our website. And don't let the name fool you. We work with people all over the country. But Alaska, as you know, Adam, has some cachet to it. So we kept it in the URL. So VeritasAlaska.com, Veritas.Alaska on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn. And if people have questions or want more info, please reach out and ask. We're happy to help.
All right, Chad, thank you so much for your time. We enjoyed the conversation. That wraps up another podcast episode for Buried in Work, where we feature tips and stories from industry professionals who specialize in making estate planning, end-of-life tasks, and estate transitions more manageable. If you enjoyed the podcast, consider leaving a review, follow us on social media, or visit us at our website, buriedinwork.com. And don't forget, podcast listeners can save 10% off Buried in Works products with code BIW podcast. Chad, thanks again. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. The honor was mine.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Buried in Work podcast. Remember, you can save 10% on our estate preparation package and games with code podcast10 at buriedinwork.com.